Hello everybody! Hi! It's June 11th. This is my May wrap-up. This is what I read in May. All of my little bookie wookies. I'm gonna review them, recommend them if I want to, tell you what I think about them, and let's get started. First, I want to say this was a very good reading month for me. I read 11 books in May. Okay, girl. Okay, this is the stack. This isn't even all of them. I don't have one of them. So this is 10 of the 11 books I read in May. Oh no. Please, can I get a grip? Get a grip, babe. Let's get into it. So the first book I read in May was From Blood and Ash. This is the first book in this series, From Blood and Ash series. It is technically a 5-book series, but there's 3 books intertwined in them. I have read the first 3 of this series before. So I've read this one before, but it was a couple years ago. Basically, it's about this girl, and her name is Poppy, and she's the maiden. So she has to wear a veil. She's a symbol of the gods for these people called the Ascended. And their whole thing is that she has to wear this veil. No one can see what she looks like until it's time for her to ascend, because she has these powers that she can touch people and feel their emotions and sense what they're feeling. But she can't do that with the Ascended. She lives this life of solidarity. I think that's the right word. She's by herself all the time. She's very lonely. She doesn't talk to anybody. Nobody knows. So she ventures out one night to this place called the Red Pearl. She meets this man. She finds out that he is somebody in her life, and she's like, oh my God. And then he turns her world upside down. I love him. This, I rated 4 stars. Because I remember the first time I read this, I was just like in utter shock. And then rereading it, you remember certain stuff. So this one is the first one. I rate this 4 stars. Highly recommend if you want a good fantasy series. There is a lot of background information, so I wouldn't recommend this as a first if you're just getting into fantasy. But if you are an experienced fantasy reader, definitely get into this. Get into this. Very spicy. And there are bad words, so FYI. The next book I read this month was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Now, let me get into this. Let me talk about this. I am trying to read more classics. I'm trying to read more intense stuff, more stuff that's harder to read because I want to challenge myself. And reading romance is not fun all the time. If you're just reading the same plot, third act breakup, they fall in love and they're together forever. I'm bored. Boring. This book, on the other hand, it is a dark academia book. They're in this college or high school, I don't even know, some academic setting. And there's like this group of 5 kids that are all Greek, like they're studying Greeks, so like they can speak in Greek to each other, they can speak in Latin to each other, and they're these rich kids that like have nothing going on. They're so precocious. I think that's the right word. They think that they're better than everybody, and they just do not care about anything. They just want to smoke and talk about Greek mythology all the time. And they are just so stuck up, and I love it. I ate it up. And so then our main character, his name is Robert. Yeah. Something like that. He comes in and he has a scholarship, so he's not this rich whatever, and he's trying to fit into this group, and it's very closed off for a certain reason. This book was so good. Okay, I rated it 3.75 stars because certain areas lost me, but now that I've thought about it, I've continually thought about this book, so I'm changing my rating to 5 stars. This book is 5 stars for me because I have thought about it constantly. There's a bunch of things that happen in this book that make these characters so complex, and they're not just these shallow, just people that you seem to see at first. All of these characters are different. They all have stuff going on in their heads and with their families. I wrote this down after I finished the book. Let me just read this to you. And I sound so stupid when I wrote this, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so smart. But anyway, this is what I wrote. I get it. Why people read tough literature, that feeling of acceptance, of reading other people's intense personal feelings about a situation, insane, stitch, or not. It's the feeling of not completely grasping it, but understanding it was still an incredible ride. I want to reread it at some point. Henry is my favorite character, then Richard. His name's Richard. Henry is one of the people in their little group. There's Henry, Francis, there's Bunny, there's Richard, and there's Charles, and then Charles' twin sister, I can't remember her name. The way they care nothing else but of knowledge and learning astounds me. They also care about money, but not really about the status, except for Bunny. I also want to give Julian a hug. Julian is their teacher. I love their teacher. He teaches them Greek. I want to give Julian a hug and drink black coffee and wear red lipstick and dusty old sweaters and scruffed up clogs. It's giving tortured poets. I care about these scarred, messed up, terribly selfish people. And I think the Torture Poets Department came out right when I finished reading this. So it's this like vibe of that dark academia setting. And ate it up. I ate it up. And it was hard to read. It was really hard to read, hard to understand everything that's going on, but I do want to definitely reread it, annotate it, and just study this work of literature. 5 stars for me. I'm going to change all my Goodreads. The next book I read was a reread. I reread Beach Read by Emily Henry. When I first read this book, I think I was a junior in high school, 3 years ago. 5 stars when I read it. It was 5 stars. I am very upset about that because when I reread it, it was 3 stars because I was very bored reading this. I was just like, I don't care. I don't care about these people. I'll tell you what it's about though. It's about this woman who's an author. Her dad passes away, and so he left her this beach house. It was apparently the house that he went and cheated on her mom with. Her mom had like cancer, and he was this great stand-up dude, and then all of a sudden she finds out that he was cheating on her mom the entire time. She has all these letters and stuff for him, and she just does not want to open them. So she has to go through the house and try to organize stuff and get rid of everything. And her next door neighbor is her arch nemesis in the writing world, Mr. Gus. I don't know though. It's just like maybe the reread just kind of put it down lower, but it's a romance. It's a really good book. If you want to get into reading, I highly recommend Beach Read. It's all over TikTok. Emily Henry, she's a big romance writer, but it just wasn't for me the second time around. And I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm in a different part of my life and like mentally I'm just not in this world. I don't know, but still a great book. I would highly recommend this book for romance readers. The next book I read was The Maidens by Alex Michaelius. I don't know how to say his name. Look at this cover. Ugh, like look at that, is so gorgeous. The Maidens is about, hold on, let me remember. It's a thriller. It's about this woman who is a group therapist. Her niece ends up going to this college that a bunch of stuff has gone down at. And her husband had passed away a couple months ago. So she's still trying to recover and still trying to like function as a human being. The story follows our female main character, and there's like a murder that happens at the college. her name's Maria. She gets involved and is trying to solve the murder because her niece is also sort of involved. This is a thriller, and this author also wrote The Silent Patient, which is one of my favorite thrillers of all time. And this one, 5 stars. 5 stars. Okay, great month of reading, okay? I've had 2 5 stars so far, and we're 4 books in out of 11. Also, I have a thing for Greek mythology, Greek gods, all that stuff. I love it. I eat it up. Like, Percy Jackson is one of my favorite series of all time. Top 2 favorite series of all time. Specifically, Gods of Olympus. My favorite book in that series, Son of Neptune. Son of Neptune. I don't even want to get into that. That's not in this video. This book was 5 stars because all of these people, it's still an academic setting. They're talking about Greek mythology and they rope that in with the murder, and I eat that up. I eat it up every single time. I don't care if I've heard all of this stuff before. I'm still gonna want to hear it again and again and again and again. And I love Greek mythology. So The Maidens, 5 stars. The end, sort of kind of guessed, but not the entirety of it. It was still so fascinating to me, and it kept me wrapped up in it. If you've read The Silent Patient, one of the main characters from that book make a cameo in this book. When that happened, I was literally like, and I was reading in my car with my mom, and I was trying to tell her and explain to her what was going on, and she was just kind of like, okay, like, you don't get it. You don't get it. This is what I wrote about this book when I was reading it. I said, he writes women so well, how we overthink things so often, and he also includes how all of these men keep coming up to her and asking her out. That was something I noticed about this book, was that the female main character, she kept being asked out by all of these random men. It was so weird, and I was like, does this have to do, like, this definitely ties into the plot somehow. So she must be some sort of beautiful, even though she talks about never feeling beautiful until Sebastian said so. Sebastian is her husband that passed away. She kind of talks about how she never saw herself as beautiful, but then he was always telling her and reassuring her that she was. And that's a whole other thing that makes her character so complex. I love his writing, and I love how he makes his characters seem and look. It's so good. 5 stars. Okay, the next book I read is the second book in the From Blood and Ash series. It's called A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. And this book, I'm giving it 3 stars. Because Poppy goes on this adventure with, I can't really tell you what happens because you have to read the story, and the whole plot twist at the end of the first one kind of affects this entire book and the rest of the series. But it's, the guy in this, he just is pissing me off the entire time. Like, he's like, I know you want me. He was very entitled, and I'm like, you literally were so, like, not nice to her, and you're making her, like, The story was good, don't get me wrong, and there was a lot of information in this, but it's the way he was treating her and the way he was kind of making her choose all of these things and kind of forcing all this stuff on her. She did not need that. I'm giving that one 3 stars. The next one I read, immediately following that one, was the third one in this series. It's called A Crown of Gilded Bones. The one thing this series does very, very well, though, I will admit, is that the ending keeps you like wrapped up in it and you just want to keep reading and keep going and you don't want to put it down at all. So you're like consuming all of this information as fast as you possibly can because you want to know what happens. That's what happened to me the first time I read this book. And that's what happened to me again when I read this the second time around. This book I'm going to give 4 stars just because the character development between the 2 main characters has fixed itself and he treats her a little bit better in this one. She sort of has to figure herself out and go through her own battle and not just with her man that's gonna protect her. He got her in this mess in the first place. That's all I have to say. But I think I'll give this one a 4 stars. But the series overall that I've read so far is a 4. On to the next book. I read The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. And if you've watched the video, me and Miss Bethy Girl went book shopping. I got this book then. And this book was recommended to me by Miss Delaney Purdue. The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. Great thriller. I have not read a Freida McFadden book before. This was my first one. Loved it. I loved it. I loved it. This book I'm going to give 4 stars because it kept me very entertained. I was very enthralled with it and I wanted to know. And it's like the way that it's told, it's like halfway through we cut to another person's point of view and then we're like, she was thinking that the entire time, and then I'm like flabbergasted, and then I need to know what happens. The end got me so good, and this is a series, and I don't know if I want to keep reading the series because the end really got me, and I just don't know if I can open that wound up again, but it was good. I recommend that book. Highly recommend book if you want a thriller. 4 stars. Now the next book, sadly do not have with me because Kimberly Longbottom is reading it right now. It's called 28 Summers by Ellen Hilderbrand. It's my first Ellen Hilderbrand book. If you watched my vacay vlog, you kind of got a little glimpse into how I feel about that book. I was reading on the beach in Key West, Florida. Just la 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 la. And the end, cried. Sobbed my eyes out on the beach. I was sitting on the beach right by the water. There was people all around me and I'm sobbing by how it ended. And the characters, they just tug at your heartstrings and you just care for them desperately and you want them to be happy. The book, oh my gosh, I'm literally not even talking about the housemaid. This woman comes and works for this family and the family has secrets. Okay, 28 Summers. This girl, her name's Mallory. She has a place in Nantucket that her aunt left her. She left her a bunch of cash too. So she lives there and is a teacher in Nantucket. And she meets this guy, his name is Jake. He is her brother's best friend and every single summer, Jake comes back to Nantucket and they have a weekend together. Even though Jake's in a relationship, he wasn't the very first summer, but he gets back into the relationship. And then she has relationships. So they're both in relationships, but are cheating on their other partners just so that they can spend their little weekend together, which I mean, it's not okay. But when you read about them and read about what they're about, you kind of let it slide. I loved this book. 5 stars. It was a 5-star read. 5-star romance because it got me so good at the end and I want to hang out with Mallory on Nantucket and I just want to chill and I want to go to the beach with her. Jake is not one of my favorite book boyfriends personally, but I see the appeal and he's very kind. Mallory, I love our female main character. They just grow together and all of these summers you see the different things that are going on in the world and it's kind of like you're traveling back in time almost. It was so good. So if you want a good romance, little summer read, I would highly recommend 28 Summers by Ellen Hilderbrand. The next book I read was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So you also saw me reading this in my reading vlog in Key West. This book, it's about this murder. No, it's not. It's a lot more complex than that. But this reporter guy has his own company and then the company was about to go under because there was a scandal that this other press was writing about his company. He is on trial, but at the same time gets recruited to go work for this super rich family somewhere in Sweden, because this is kind of where this is all taking place. This is a Swedish author. Goes and works for this family to solve this 40-year-old murder or disappearance of this old dude's niece. Hillary, I think is her name. So she like disappeared so many years ago and then the old dude hires this guy to come and figure out what actually happened and how she was murdered, even though they never found the body. This book, I'm giving it 3 stars because the story was interesting at certain points and like the end really kind of got me, but this book felt too long, way too long. There was way too much information in it. A lot of it was just excess and not necessary, and I lost interest so many times. But I was reading this book and listening to it, which definitely helped keep me involved with the book. But it was so just like, I don't care. I don't care about all of this stuff. You are way too invested in this, sir. So I'm giving this 3 stars. If you are like a strong reader and can kind of power through, I would recommend, or like listening to it, sure. But the names are also in Swedish, so I couldn't remember who was who. And it's like the main guy, his name, let me just tell you his name. Mikael Blomkvist. That's his name. So he's called Blomkvist. They call him by his last name. And then they call him Kyle. And then they call him Mikael. And then I think they have another name for him. But I could never remember his name. And I couldn't remember half the other people's names. Over it. I'm over this book. I'm glad I read it because I've seen a lot of it. But it's a lot darker than what I thought it was going to be. So I would look up trigger warnings before you read this book. But the main girl with the dragon tattoo, love her. She's a slay. She's great. Elizabeth Salander. She's cool. I like her. 3 stars. The next book I read was Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. And I'm giving this book 3 stars. It's my first ever cowboy romance. Thank you. Thank you. The plot was kind of lame. It's a good palate cleanser. There's not really a whole lot of substance going on in this book. Their romance was cute. He helped her deal with stuff, but it was very spicy. So just FYI. I was kind of like, you know, it's one of those books. I don't want to get into it. She comes home, she's dealing with stuff, and he helps her through it. And then they form a relationship together. And they're enemies at first, but then they move past it, you could say. 3 stars for that one. The last book I read this month, drumroll please, Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. This is my second Sally Rooney book. The first one I read was Normal People. I read Normal People by Sally Rooney last year. Sally Rooney does not write with quotations. So when someone's talking, you're supposed to put quotations around what they're saying. So like, I can't believe he did that, Lauren said. So you put quotations around, I can't believe he said that. Sally Rooney does not do that. She does not write with quotations, so you have to figure out what they're saying and you have to actually pay attention. This reads like a literary novel. It's a little bit harder to understand. You have to kind of pay attention, as well as the no dialogue quotations bit. You have to pay even more attention. This is about 2 girls. Our main character, her name's Frances, and she's very standoffish. She's not very bubbly and like outspoken. She's like cool towards people, and she writes poetry. And then her friend, Bobby, I'm assuming this is Bobby, she reads her poetry for her because she doesn't have much of a personality. Frances doesn't, but Bobby has the sparkle and the personality. So they'll perform the poetry together. But then Frances gets involved with a man and she's having an affair. She's having an affair with a married man. That's the whole plot of the book. This book, I'm giving it 3 stars because it could be honestly 2.5 to 3. The only reason I'm giving it a 3 is because there were certain scenes in this book that I was just like, wow, that is some crazy writing. And it just makes you think and ponder about life. So there was a couple of those in there. But the majority of this book was depressing. It's depressing and sad, and made me sad reading it. And it took me forever to finish it, it felt like, because it was just so slow. And I was like, oh my God. Ugh. Don't care. I don't care. Okay, you're cheating and you're getting him involved and then you're making him feel all bad and stuff and you're just depressed. You need to be put on medication, this man. So I don't know if she actually is depressed or just the vibe of this book made it seem depressing. But if you want a sad book, depressing, like melancholy book, it's for you. Okay, so all in all, this was a great reading month of May. June has been a little rough so far, but we're making it through. Thank you so much for watching. If you stayed till this point, I appreciate you and I love you all so much. You don't have to watch me yap about books, but if you do, that means the world to me. If you got any recommendations, please let me know. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you think about them. Thank you again for watching. Like, subscribe. I will see you guys in the next video. I'm cooking up one right now, so just you wait. Just wait. Okay, everyone, have a good day. I love you. Stay safe out there. Mwah, 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 mwah.